Hello, this is Brian Fairchild, and I'm appearing to you now on Awakened Nation with Brad Solis.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Solis, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people, just like you and me, from all over, who are doing amazing things to Awakened Nation.
Hey, everybody. I have a great guest on today. You're going to love this guy. Former Green Beret. He's a former CIA case officer with expertise in counterterrorism. We have Brian Fairchild on the show today. Hi, Brian. Welcome to Awakened Nation, my
Brad,
friend.
it's a pleasure to meet you, and it's my honor to be on this show. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me on.
Not only thank you for your service, I'm going to give you a big salute there. But yeah, thank you so much for all you do to make America safe.
More than welcome, sir.
Now you hear my Pennsylvania accent. Come on.
I lived in Pennsylvania. I lived in Pennsylvania for 10 years in Hughesville.
Oh, no kidding. I'm
Yeah.
from Lebanon. There,
Yeah.
that's how you say it. I can't say Lancaster. I have to say
Yeah.
Lancaster.
Yeah.
So yeah, learn to hunt, fish. Model American.
Oh man, I'd go hiking up there. I actually ran into 8 black bears over a period of years on the trails up above Hughesville.
And they're kind of like, "Hey, what's up?"
Yeah.
My favorite movie is The Deer Hunter, simply
Oh
because
yeah.
people don't realize it's so beautiful up there. So, but sorry, I'm being a chatty Cathy here, but yeah, Miss Pennsylvania sometimes out here in Vegas. So
I do too. I do as well.
yeah. Now I got to read a little bit of your bio, but folks, you're in for a real treat today. Brian has 2 decades of experience working in the CIA. Brian's journey through the world of international intelligence is captivating and enlightening in regard to today's current affairs and geopolitical climate. We're going to talk a lot about that today. In the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks here in the United States, Brian's unwavering mission has been to enhance public understanding of the threats posed by countries like China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, while offering effective solutions through firsthand experience. His dedication remains steadfast as he addresses crucial issues with the intelligence community, especially within the CIA. Brian's expertise is unparalleled, underscored by his testimony before Congress as a subject matter expert. And we're going to talk about your new novel today, Brian, The Hidden. It looks fascinating. I started to breeze over it, but it weaves fiction and real world experiences, taking readers on a thrilling journey into the secret intelligence war between China and the United States. He skillfully presents genuine threats like AI driven surveillance and biological weaponry in a comprehensive and enjoyable manner. Brian, once again, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, the book, just to give you a little sidebar. I mean, I didn't write the book because I'm an author or I aspire to be a great author. I wrote the book, Brad, because I was pissed off at CIA. So yeah, absolutely. And the title, The Hidden, people are always like, why do you call it The Hidden? Well, The Hidden refers to remaining hidden below China's radar. And that's one of the key points that, I'll be talking about today.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because we had Robert Rivenbark on the show, and he's a science fiction author, and he wrote a book called The Cloud, and it's scary just how in alignment he's talking about the future of VR and AI. And I felt the same about your book. And I don't think people really understand the threat that China has on the rest of the world, because this is more totalitarianism. People have been taught that, oh, China's pretty good nowadays, but it's really totalitarianism dressed up as capitalism, as I always like to say. But let's dig in today. What should we be concerned about when it comes to China?
Well, man, I mean, there's 4 or 5 hours worth of conversation right there, Brad.
Well, let's get started.
But to start out, China is our number one threat, but that doesn't even say it, because in reality, China is the leader of the new axis of evil. Now, I coined that. I didn't coin that phrase originally. That was President Bush back in during the Iraq War. But I've called it the new axis of evil because it encompasses China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And these four countries are these four anti-American, this four anti-American military bloc is led by China, and they're doing everything they can to unseat the United States of America as the world power. So
Right.
what they do is so people say, well, what do you mean? And how does that work? And, well, why should we be worried about that? Well, the United States, military is kind of in decline. And, we're at the lowest number of American soldiers in 80 years. Our services can't meet their recruiting quotas. And, we have a lack of key weapon systems. For instance, China has the hypersonic missile. The hypersonic missile is a weapon that we have no defenses against. And it's not Brian Fairchild saying that. It's Mark Milley when he was recently the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And then to your point, AI, I mean, China is going nuts in AI. And
Yeah.
see, they can do things, Brad, that we can't because China is an authoritarian communist country. They've got 1 million Uyghurs in Xinjiang province, basically in concentration camps. They're
Right.
basically committing genocide against the Uyghurs and the Tibetans. Anybody who's not Han Chinese, which is the main artery of Chinese genetics is Han Chinese. Anybody who's not Han Chinese, they basically want to get out of the way. So the Uyghurs are getting pushed out of the way. The Tibetans, anybody who believes in Falun Gong, which is basically a religion based on
Right.
Christianity, all of that has to go. And China is the world's largest surveillance state. So they've got surveillance technologies that beat us. I mean, we can't deal with them, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But the main thing is that it's the leader of this four anti-American military bloc, and because of our situation, China and the other three in the new axis of evil are dedicating themselves to splitting up our resources and throwing our resources and our attention and our economics and our intelligence resources, military resources to the four winds, right? So when North Korea, and this is a coordinated effort, right? So they say, well, let's keep the United States moving. Let's keep the United States on edge the whole time. So North Korea will lob missiles over Japan, and what do? We immediately go, oh, that's terrible, and we send a couple of U.S. carrier battle groups up to North Korea, and we do some exercises up there. And of course, we're every day, excuse me, we're supporting and draining our military stocks by supporting Ukraine, every single day. And then they got together and they said, well, hey, let's cause a problem for the United States in the Middle East. So Iran, basically gave orders to Hamas and said, attack Israel. And everybody was going, why are they attacking Israel now? Why would they do that? Well, it's because it's the new axis of evil. So what did we do? We've got one of the most one of the largest military deployments in the Middle East for 50, 70 years right now cruising in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, and we're using up our resources there. Now, what happens, Brad, if at this particular point in time China decides I'm going to move on Taiwan?
Yeah.
Where's the United States going to get its armaments? Where's the United what are we going to do? What's the plan?
Yeah.
Where will we bring military assets? Are we going to bring them from the Middle East? And if so, then did we need them in the Middle East? See, we don't have a plan. We don't have a strategy. The United States government doesn't have a strategy, and that's maybe will come to a shock to your audience. But I mean, most people think, oh, the United States government, oh, we've got things covered. Something happens, we look in a playbook and we go, we'll just do this, but we don't. And Biden is basically doing a reaction thing, a knee-jerk reaction thing. North Korea, let's send assets there. Middle East, let's send assets there. Ukraine, let's send assets there. But you might notice that when things happen around Taiwan, we don't send any assets there. And
Right.
the reason is because we're outgunned and outmanned in the whole area, 1,000 miles from China's coast, anywhere, and we're outgunned and outmanned. So I'll stop there and let you get a couple of words in edgewise.
I feel like we used to be the echelon of how to handle things, diplomacy overseas, things like this. And it has declined so dramatically over the past 20 years. I read Richard Maybury, who's written several books. He's a geopolitical analyst,
Mm-hmm.
and several of his books just woke me up. And the first one that I read was The Thousand Year War in the Mideast
Right.
and how it affects you today. And then the second one is Ancient Rome, how it affects you today. And our news media, I hate to say it, but several months ago, there was a peace deal brokered between Saudi Arabia, Iran, China, and Russia were all involved, the three of the BRIC nations.
Right.
And it was basically like, oh, okay, what's going on here? And our news media just went, oh, okay, that happened. They didn't really get involved, but this is a big issue
Oh, it's
because
huge.
they've gotten rid of the US dollar as the backup currency for the world. For those of you who may not know who are listening, our currency used to be used as a backup currency in case some local warlord's currency went into the toilet and they would have pallets of US dollars. Well, that was gotten away with probably 20 years ago. It was very quietly talked about in the news. And that's when we started to see all this prosperity in Brazil. Well, what was happening is Brazil, China, Russia, and India, BRIC, those nations got together, created their own basket of currencies, and started to exclude NATO and the United States from any kind of commerce. And a lot of people were like scratching their head. Well, why is this a big deal? It's a huge deal because they are preparing to step up into world superpower dominance. And for some Americans, I hate to say it, Brian, we've been taught a comic book cartoon version of geopolitics to this next generation.
Oh, yeah.
They don't know what the big deal is. So let's dive into this a little bit. I feel we're incredibly naive. We're like teenagers who don't know what the hell is really going on in the world.
Yeah. Well, Brad, I mean, America today, and this is the point I make in the book, but I make it coming from the mouth of Xi Jinping. Because, Americans, we feel as though, we can criticize ourselves, but other people better not criticize us, that kind of
Right.
thing. But when you hear it coming from the enemy, it affects you differently. And so, if you were to have the Ministry of State Security director, the CIA of China, the Ministry of State Security, if you should have the director of that organization briefing Xi Jinping, and he asks them, what do you think of the United States these days? He would say something like, well, the United States of America has negated the word united in that title. It's no longer the United States of America. You can call it the divided states of America or the polarized states of America or the dysfunctional states of America. You could call it the Trump states of America or the Biden
Yeah.
states of America, but you can't call them the United States of America, sir. And so, the United States is so polarized, so divided on everything that they cannot decide on anything. So, if you're the enemy of the United States of America, you're in the sweet spot. This is exactly where you want to be. And they are taking advantage of this every single day.
Yeah, I hate to say it. Um, I remember reading Mayberry's, Thousand Year War in the Mideast, and then you hear our politicians say, I hate to say it, the dumbest things ever.
Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
military started reading Mayberry's newsletter because they used a term that only he uses, and he says there have been 41,000 wars for since 3600 BC. And all those wars took place in an area where that is now Russia, over to Japan, and in North Africa, and over right to the edge of Europe. He said all those wars took place in these areas. And he says, he calls it the land of chaos or Chaostan.
Yeah.
And
And that's good. I like it.
our military started using that term, but they said the land of chaos, basically. So that told him they were reading his newsletter in secret because he's probably one of the most accurate geopolitical analysts,
Yeah.
I've ever met.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about this. What is the big lie that keeps getting perpetrated here in the United States? We are divided right now. We can't agree on anything. We're fighting against each other. And I do believe some of that has been created on purpose. But let's talk about that. What's the big lie that we need to stop believing in?
Well, the big lie, I mean, I'm an intelligence officer, so I'm focused on threats, right?
Right.
And so the biggest threat is China and this anti-American bloc that is up against us. And so for me, an intelligence officer, I want to see a plan. I want to see what are we doing to counter this, four nation anti-American military bloc.
Right.
We have to have things going on. We have to well, first of all, you have to understand the enemy, and we don't. See, because you don't have anybody in Washington, including Biden, who says, well, in fact, Biden doesn't even admit that China is really a threat. He regards them as a competitor. And he has gone out of his way since he took office. I mean, you can research this. I mean, in his own words, he goes out of his way to say, I don't want to have a war with you, China. I don't want to have any kind of real problems or confrontation with you, China. All I want is, can you please allow me to come and meet you? And then when he finally gets to meet Xi Jinping, nothing comes out of it. Well, here, can I just continue for a second? Because I want
Please,
to
please do. You're the expert on this. Please.
I want to show how this affects the United States and how China is taking advantage of this. So back into, I mean, your viewers have undoubtedly heard that this area called the South China Sea is kind of a vital area. They probably don't know why, but it's kind of a vital area. And Taiwan is in there. And they know, they probably know that, well, Taiwan is claimed by China, and China is really kind of, militaristic about this. And Biden has said on a couple of occasions, if they invade Taiwan, we'll go to protect it, and so forth and so on. But in reality, here's how the whole situation has been going in the South China Sea. In 2013, China started building man-made islands in the South China Sea. They have like about 6 or 7 of them now, and they're continuing to build others. Now, all these islands have become military bastions, and it's these every area has missiles, including hypersonic missiles that we can't defend against. So in 2013, they started building these islands, Brad. And by 2015, you know, Xi Jinping comes over to the United States, and President Obama goes to him and says, "Hey, my guys say I should be concerned about this building islands in the South China Sea. What's the deal there, Xi?" And Xi looks him in the eye and he says, "I give you my word, I will not militarize those islands." Until 6 months later, and he started militarizing his islands.
Right.
Okay, so you got 2013, 2015, now 2018. 2018, an admiral by the name of Admiral Davidson was going through his hearings in Congress to become the commander of the Indo-Pacific Command. And in 2018, only basically 4 years, I mean, 2013, 2014, they started building these islands. So 4 years later, basically, Admiral Davidson stands before Congress and says, "Gentlemen, ladies, for all intents and purposes, short of war with the United States, China controls the South China Sea." Well, that's a major thing, Brad.
Yep.
That changed the balance of power in a snap of the fingers. China controls, for all intents and purposes, the South China Sea. Okay, so now people say, "Yeah, but what do I care? It's over there in Asia. Couldn't even find it on a map. What's the big deal?" Well, the big deal is, okay, so Taiwan sits in the South China Sea. Taiwan is being run by a democratic nation called the Republic of China, not the communist China, but another China. In the Chinese Civil War, Chiang Kai-shek got chased off the mainland and went to Taiwan and established his base on Taiwan. So for all these years, China has said, "We're going to get Taiwan back." Well, what does Taiwan lie astride? Taiwan lies astride the South China Sea, where 60%, basically 60% of all trade in the world passes through.
Yeah.
So he's already controlled the South China Sea for all intents and purposes, short of war with the United States. If he controls Taiwan, then he will control the entire Asian Sea, and he will be able to influence all of that trade. And you hear about us putting sanctions on people, he'll start putting sanctions on us, and there won't be
Yeah.
anything we can do about it. I mean, you hear how proud we are. Oh, we put so many sanctions against the Russians that boy, they're having a hard time. We put so many sanctions against Xi Jinping on these computer chips. Oh, he's having a hard time, but they continue doing exactly what they're doing. And once he takes over Taiwan, you know, we're kind of toast. And he'll all the economic problems you hear about China having, because of sanctions stuff will automatically be gone because every country in Asia will basically be forced to trade with him, and all countries around the world as well. So that sort of shows you how you can bring it from, well, what's this kind of weird understanding of this far away stuff and how does it affect me? Now you can see, we can have sanctions. Your bread, your loaves of bread could shoot up to $18, a loaf, that sort of thing. So I mean, it's a
Yeah.
major deal.
People, you know, they really don't understand what's happening. And it's happened before. Our politicians mess up because they want to make everybody happy. Uh, and then all of a sudden we have this sort of what do you call it when they extort us for financial gain. So
Sure.
let's take a look at it. Here's the potential of what's going to happen. Our military is very low. We don't have the military we had during World War II when we had 20 million active duty troops around the world. And so we're vulnerable. That's number one. Number two, most of our pharmaceuticals are manufactured in China. Imagine your monthly medication for diabetes shoots up 2,000%,
Yeah.
and your politicians aren't protecting you. We also have found out, that the Bidens have taken plenty of money from China businessmen, CCP, things like this. We actually have the documents, and nobody's investigating them. And here we are suddenly stuck with, uh, if people can't see the writing on the wall, I don't know what to tell them because
Yeah.
China used to hold 23% of our debt. That's
Yeah.
pretty big. How did our politicians respond to that? They sold off sections of the United States to them. Now you have whole communities and counties that have been bought up by the Chinese, and they have elections and things like that, and they do everything to look like they're in the United States, but they don't speak English. They have their own police squads,
Right.
and a lot of these elected officials are the elite, from
Yeah.
mainland China. And so we're being sold off tiny bits at a time. Our Great Lakes, by the way, we don't own those anymore. Those have been sold off to the highest bidder. So our farmland now is being
Yeah.
sold, and it's all to keep this hidden, to use your expression,
There you
to
go.
keep the, how did you like that? That was good.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
great. Good
to keep
segue.
they keep this below the radar to the American people. So we sit there like naive children and go, why did we suddenly get attacked? And why is this happening in the South China Sea? We don't know because they don't want us to know.
Yeah, we have
Am I
no
correct in
education.
this?
Yeah. I mean, the president, normally, I mean, I remember growing up in the Cold War when a president of the United States would sit down before the nation and, all cameras would be on him and he would explain why we had a problem with the Soviet Union and China and they're merged together and all
Yep.
this sort of thing and educate the American public. Now you just have little snippets of phrases like, we have a decade to deal with China. No, we don't even have
No,
anything
we
at
don't.
all. Now
Yeah.
here's something that your audience, and what I find is audience was whenever I'm speaking, we have this understanding. Americans have this understanding because of World War II and how well we came out of that, and how well we did after World War II, that we are the most powerful military in the world, and it doesn't matter what Fairchild says or what Brad says. And we're the most powerful military in the world, and we really don't have to worry about things because if push comes to shove, we'll just move in and do what we do best. And actually, that's not true. And now I'll tell you a little story here. I've just told you about the South China Sea and how
Right.
in 4 years, the admiral in charge of the whole South China Sea for the United States government says China controls it for all intents and purposes, short of war. Well, you might see all these military assets we have in the Middle East right now. You read about all the military
Yeah.
assets put up by North Korea, but you don't see any of those military assets around Taiwan. Why is it? Well, the conspiracy theorists would undoubtedly just focus only on, well, Biden's being bought by the Chinese, and maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I'm an intelligence officer. If I'm going to make a huge claim, I have to have huge evidence to back it up.
Right.
But what I can tell you is this: the reason why our carrier battle groups on the 6 or 7 times now that China has blockaded Taiwan, and remember, every one of these blockades that they do around Taiwan is training for them with a real enemy watching from the outside, us, right?
Yeah.
And so the reason why we have never done anything like we're doing in the Middle East right now is because we can't. Militarily, we can't. And here's why. In 2021, the US Army wrote a paper on the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force. And they said the People's Liberation Rocket Force is the largest rocket force in the world, most diverse rocket force in the world, has missiles that we can't defend against, as well as nuclear capabilities and so forth and so on. But then they focus on one aspect of that, of that missile arsenal, and it was anti-ship missiles. Well, anti-ship missiles are going to be key in any battle that, or any kind of a skirmish, any kind of military confrontation at all around Taiwan, because it's going to be our Navy that goes to the defense. Well, let me just throw out a couple of facts and figures here that your audience might not realize. China has the largest Navy in the world. And it's not a sampan Navy. It's not people rowing with little,
Yeah.
bamboo huts on top and stuff. These are equivalent capabilities to our capabilities. So they got the largest Navy in the world. They have 370 ships. We have under 370. We have under 300. We have like 284, 294, something like that. They have the largest Coast Guard in the world. They have the largest military militia, marine militia in the world.
Yeah.
They have the largest fisheries in the world. They have the largest shipbuilding capability in the world. These guys are a powerhouse of strength and power and military power. And so when you take, the U.S. has 284 ships that, we use to patrol the entire world. And at any given time, 1/3 of those ships or more are in dry dock being repaired. So now you've only got like 200 ships for all of our responsibilities around the world. And China's got the largest Navy in the world and can add to that their, their Coast Guard, which can be fitted. The Coast Guard vessels, Brad, of China are more like military frigates. I mean, they
Yeah.
can be fitted with anti-ship missiles. The Marine militia is capable of doing all the things that you read about when they're blockading the Philippines from going to their own islands. It's mostly the Marine militia that's doing that. So at any given time, let's say they could bring together, say, 600 ships in their area of operations, and we only have 200 spread around the world. Now, the problem is, as we get close to the borders of Taiwan and mainland China, the U.S. Army said of these anti-ship missiles that China has, it has so many, I'm going to probably have to repeat this, it has so many anti-ship missiles, China does, that it can hit every surface combatant of the United States Navy in the South China Sea, hit every single one of them, all the way from down in Singapore to up around Japan. And to the extent where every one of our ships have used up all their missile defense capability, knocking those missiles out of the air, and China still has more left over to sink them.
Yeah.
So that's why you don't see the U.S. carrier battle groups rushing in to bring vessels and stuff around Taiwan, because we can't get close enough to even use our own weapons before China can knock us out of the water. And then, of course, they've got hypersonic missiles, which we can't defend against. So I mean, China is not some sissy, nation run by a Chinese guy that looks like somebody's old grandfather and stuff. It's one of the most powerful countries in the world, and around Asia, it is the dominant military capability in the world. So, that should shake people up right there.
It should. You were talking numbers before. I want everybody to understand that the numbers we're really talking about here. Because here in the United States, what do we have? 350 million people? Million.
Yeah,
So I saw this on 60 Minutes. And by the way, this is old data. And they showed the military over in China years ago. China at that time, when this was broadcast, had 250 million troops. 250 million troops, folks. That means they could have a soldier in every household in America. That's number one. Number two, China is so big; they have like 1.6 billion, people in the population there and growing. They have so many people being born every single month that 100,000 18-year-old young men could enlist every single month starting right now
yeah,
into the
and
military.
a lot of them are. I mean, see, we can't meet our armed
We
forces quotas.
right.
We just can't do it.
Yeah. And so when we're sitting here talking about the size of these countries, the United States would fit nice and tiny inside of China. This is a vast, very large country. And unlike Russia, that turned out to be a paper tiger, where they were throwing money at something until they ran out of money, I do believe that China has been planning this for probably 100 years easily.
Oh
So
yeah.
that their stockpile. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. And don't forget, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran are all in it together. These are coordinated actions. It wasn't like Russia just invaded Ukraine and then the rest of these guys said, "Oh, that's pretty good. Way to go, Vladimir." I mean, if you remember, Vladimir Putin was meeting with Xi Jinping just before he invaded. They've discussed it. They're like, "We're going to have to use up all of America's resources. We're going to have to wear them down to the extent where they can't respond to us anymore." And that's the plan that they're doing. A little known fact. I mean, it was interesting the facts that you just thrown about China. Well, in their 1.4, 1.6 billion people, they have as many people studying English as we have a population.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. How many
Yeah.
Americans do you think speak Mandarin Chinese? I mean,
I know two.
yeah, I do,
Yeah.
but I'm the only one I know in my immediate surroundings. So we have a major problem here, and then we have a major problem with our intelligence services, which is one of the reasons that we allowed China to become the threat it is. And if you
Yeah.
got a few minutes, I'll explain that.
Please. This is a fascinating, episode that we're talking about. And I hope it's a chance for everybody to wake up because a lot of us, Brian, are just thinking local when we have
Right.
to start thinking global. Our
Absolutely.
politicians are not protecting us, it seems like.
No.
But please, let's go on.
Well, in 1991, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, is supposed to be the country's premier civilian strategic intelligence agency in the country. And during the old Cold War against the Soviet Union, we were, and we were strategic. CIA was strategic. And what do I mean by strategic? Well, difference between tactical and strategic. Tactical is, a military guy sees a machine gun nest and he and his squad have to figure out how he's going to maneuver to take out that one machine gun nest. Strategic is how many how many machine guns does China have? How many people in the armed services? What are their policies towards the United States? What the heck what kind of a threat are they? And all the big picture stuff. Are they going to move on us and so forth and so on? It's not a small little narrow window. It's the big picture. So because the Soviet Union was, extended itself worldwide and had, KGB officers and embassies in Brunei and Jakarta and every place around the world, the CIA was set up to counter them. So we had to go to every place in the world. So Brian Fairchild could go to Jakarta, not necessarily because Indonesia was a big thing for us in a foreign policy way, but because the Soviets were there. And what spies do is they recruit. They recruit foreigners, they recruit foreign spies, they recruit foreign members of government. So, for instance, my job was to go wherever I was to go. If I was to, if I was stationed to Timbuktu, I would have to, try to penetrate the government of Timbuktu while I'm trying to recruit a couple of Chinese and KGB officers at the same time. And then they provide intelligence to the United States. There are spies, right? We recruit spies. So we steal these secrets and we get these secrets. And then when I give these secrets, I write it in a report and it goes to the policymakers. So the policymakers look at everything. They look at military intelligence, they look at economic intelligence, diplomatic intelligence, and the CIA's intelligence stolen from spies from the center of these governments. And they say, okay, what policy can we make that will counter the threats that we're facing? So that's what spies do. But in 1991, the Soviet Union went belly up. There was no more Soviet Union. So the reason for CIA's existence evaporated. It didn't have
Right.
a reason anymore. So now it became like a rudderless boat for the next 10 years. For the next 10 years, it became like a rudderless boat, bouncing off shoals over here and shoals over there, trying to figure out what it can do. And the policymakers didn't give it any encouragement. In fact, at that time, in around 1991, there was a famous US congressman by the name of Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And
Ah,
Daniel Patrick Moynihan was a flamboyant guy. He's always in the news. He was a very intelligent man. And he came up, I don't know if you can see it here. I've got a picture right here. This is Jim Woolsey, who was the director of CIA at the time.
right.
And came up to Jim Woolsey and he said, Jim, you did a great job, guys. I mean, you beat them. It's the Cold War's over. You've defeated those guys. Do we even really need a CIA anymore? Do we
Huh.
need you anymore, Jim? And that's how the policymakers viewed CIA after the fall of the Soviet Union. And they wanted to get what they called the peace dividend. All the money that had been spent on intelligence operations all over the world against the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact countries and all these guys, they wanted all that money to use in their constituencies and for their own special programs and so forth and so on. So CIA was forced to wander trying to figure out what its mission was until 10 years later. And then 10 years later, on September 11th, 2001, Al Qaeda hit the United States and the CIA found its new primary mission. But it wasn't one of many. It wasn't, an equal among five equals. It was the only mission, and it was counterterrorism, and it was narrow as this. And so George Tenet said just before that happened, he said CIA was in basically Chapter 11 bankruptcy because it had been so mishandled and so abandoned by the policymakers. No one had those policymakers, Brad, actually said and thought and believed that there was an end to history. We don't have to worry
Wow.
about this stuff anymore. We are we have vanquished all the bad guys. We are the only thing around. We're the only game in town. We never have to worry about anybody taking us on again. So we don't need this kind of stuff. We don't need a strong military anymore, and we don't need a CIA and all these intelligence agencies running around doing spy type stuff.
Right.
So that's how the nation went. Now all of a sudden we had this new mission. And when you're a guy who runs an institution like George Tenet was when Al Qaeda hit us, you jump on that, right? Because you don't have a mission. Now you have a mission, and everybody in the nation is behind you. All the policymakers are like, "What's this Al Qaeda about? Why did they attack us? Who's this Osama bin Laden guy? What's going on? What's going on?" So they need to know, right? And so all of a sudden, your institution gets flooded with money. But what's it for? Counterterrorism. It gets flooded with personnel. But what kind of personnel? Counterterrorist specialists. It gets flooded with everything, but everything it's flooded with and everything it does from that point on is all about counterterrorism for the next 20 years. For the next 20 years. So during those 20 years, CIA basically stopped worrying about the world, didn't think it was important to be watching China, didn't think it was important to be watching Russia, North Korea, or Iran, or any of the rest of the world because they were focused on the primary mission, and that was counterterrorism. So I mean, heck, if you had a guy in the Chinese premier's office, if I had a spy penetrating, and I went to CIA during that time, they'd say, "Does he know where Bin Laden is?" And I'd say, "Well, no. Okay, we don't need that." Okay, I mean that's how bad it was.
Wow.
And so we ended up, for 2 decades, not doing anything but counterterrorism. And everybody in the CIA during those 20 years, they started as a counterterrorist specialist. They got promoted as counterterrorist specialists. They were assigned as counterterrorist specialists. And then all of a sudden, counterterrorism became kind of passe, right? And it started fading away. Well, CIA didn't even create its own cool, neato, secret squirrel group of paramilitary case officers. What they did is they've done what we've always done for our special activities division or our special operations group, and that's we went to the teams. We went to SEAL Team 6. We went to Delta Force. We went to the
Right.
SEAL teams and the Special Forces groups and the 75th Ranger Regiment and the Marine Recon. And we took people right out of those teams into CIA. We took some holy water and said, "You're CIA, you're CIA, you're CIA," and now they're CIA. But I
Yeah.
mean, they really were. I mean, they were guys who were going to re-up or
Yeah.
resign from the military. Now they've come and they're doing the exact same thing they did Friday on Monday, but now they're CIA officers. And CIA and paramilitary case officers are different than spies like I was a spy. Spies like me were guys who were sent overseas, lived overseas their whole career, spoke foreign languages, understood foreign cultures, foreign religions, regional politics, national politics, geopolitical politics, because you had to go out and recruit spies among all those governments and try to understand what the threat to the United States was. Now, a paramilitary case officer is completely different. He's a guy from the team. He's the guy who's doing that tactical thing. He's going to that street corner to take out that terrorist because we've found out in our system that that terrorist is a threat and he was somehow involved in the bombings of our embassies in Africa. So that's why we're going after him. And they take a helo in, and they're just like you see on TV. I mean, they're pretty well uh, portrayed on movies and stuff. They've got the goggles, they've got the M4s, they got the
Right.
and they go around and they land in the helo and they move to their target. They take out their target or capture their target, get back on a helo and leave, and that's it. And they're not living overseas. Some of them did in forward operating bases, but mostly in war zones like Afghanistan or Iraq. But those other than those, I mean, they all lived back in Virginia, and they
Yeah.
surged to places that we needed people. And you
Yeah.
can't run a foreign, strategic intelligence agency by living in Virginia, not recruiting foreign spies, not understanding foreign cultures or politics, and running over with an American, diplomatic passport when all of a sudden something bad goes and so hey, I'm from CIA, I need your help. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So that's the situation we got ourselves into.
Wow. It's very scary because I feel like we're super vulnerable right now. Um, Almost as if it's been set up that way. Because once something happens, then you can turn around and throw money at it. And in this case, we're too late.
Yeah.
It's going to be too late because we're talking about a military that's so deep and vast, we may not recover if
Yeah,
they
well,
do.
there are many reports out that are saying, you know, that China is so advanced in given areas that we might never be able to catch up. And now I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. I mentioned hypersonic missiles. Well, lo and behold, it might surprise you to understand that the Americans created hypersonic missiles. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, called DARPA, over in the Pentagon, way back when, created the whole concept and started testing hypersonic missiles. And then there was an end to history, Brad. So we didn't need that stuff anymore. So we just
Right.
threw it away.
Yeah.
We didn't need it. But the Chinese were always looking ahead. They were always thinking strategically. They were always
Yeah.
looking for American vulnerabilities. And they looked at us during Desert One, and we saw they saw us just decimate Saddam Hussein, and with all the missiles and shock and awe, and they said, well, we can't go up against that. but we can do things that they can't do that will be vulnerable, their vulnerabilities. And one of the things they chose was hypersonic missiles, especially knowing that there would be a huge naval contingent needed to go against them in Taiwan.
Yeah.
So they created the hypersonic missile. And now, I mean, and their hypersonic missiles, by the way, are operational. And when I
Yeah.
say operational, I mean they exist today, are in missile silos, ready to shoot right now. Right now, if I give the bet, boom, hypersonic missiles go to Guam, hypersonic missiles go to Okinawa, hypersonic missiles go to Taiwan, hypersonic missiles go to hit our ships. Right now, they've got them, and they've got thousands of them. So they're operational. We don't have one. We don't have
Yeah.
one operational hypersonic missile, not even one. We've got a couple of prototypes. We've had setbacks. We can't seem to get the magic back, even though we created the hypersonic missile. We can't seem to get that back, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
Well, during the time we're working on it, China has not only had, made their nuclear missiles hypersonic, and their intermediate range ballistic missiles hypersonic, and their short range missiles hypersonic. They have hypersonic missiles launched from planes, on fighter aircraft. I mean, they got hypersonic missiles up one side and down the other. But see, here's where you got to understand that if we don't enter into these technologies, we really miss out on a lot, because the Chinese took that technology and their understanding of hypersonics, and they created a hypersonic generator. Well, one of the things that we've had problems, working with is we tried to, develop a rail gun. I don't know if do you know, Brad, what a rail gun is? A rail gun is
Yes.
yeah, okay. For your audience, a rail gun is, it launches its projectiles through electromagnetism. There's no explosion of gunpowder. You don't need gunpowder. You need
Yep.
slugs. You put the slugs in the rail gun, and electromagnetism goes boom, and it fires that thing out
Speeds. Yep.
at speeds that are just incredible. And so if you can have that on a naval vessel, and you don't have to have stockpiles of missiles down in the bottom of your ship, you're shooting at great distances at American targets, either landborne or seaborne. Boom, 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 and you don't ever have to worry about affording a missile again. So they can use that hypersonic generator to support the railgun. Then they decided, well, not only that, but we can use that technology, and we'll create the world's biggest hypersonic wind tunnel. Well, we have wind tunnels in the United States to test our aircraft and stuff, but they're small. You have to use a model in those wind tunnels.
Right.
China's wind tunnel is the biggest wind tunnel in the world. They can put entire aircraft in the wind tunnel and test real capabilities right now. So they once you, as a nation, once you get into a technology, you find out there's all these collateral benefits that come from you dominating that technology. And so they
Yeah.
did that with hypersonics. They're doing that with AI. They're doing it with bioengineering, and it goes on and on and on. And we're still trying to catch up.
Well, in our uh, pursuance of we're all going to get along on planet Earth and sing Kumbaya, there's been some pretty dopey things that our um, manufacturers have done, our people who actually develop weapons, things like that. They were sending like here's an example, headgear that's used to monitor and work within let's say a jet. They were
Right.
sending those parts over to be manufactured in China, and China was putting their own surveillance equipment inside our manufacturers' stuff.
Oh yeah.
And it was coming back here, and they were monitoring everything we've built. So
Yeah.
if you don't think China is militarily and technologically more advanced than us, then you might be a little naive.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, here was the problem. Okay, there was an end to history, right? You
Yeah.
don't need CIA, you don't need a big military anymore. You don't need this stuff. So if you're a politician, that means you don't have to understand this stuff anymore. You don't have to understand the world anymore. All you want to do is concentrate on being a businessman and getting rich. Well,
Yeah.
China is a huge economy, is the number two economy in the world, may at some point overtake the United States as the number one economy. but it's a huge economy. Everybody is scared to death of going against China because they need China's trade, including the United States of America. Now, this hat, is a hat commemorating my special forces group, the 19th Special Forces Group here. It's made in China. The hat is made in China. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Everything's made in China. So, I mean, China's got this huge economy, and that helps them in immense ways because the United States is trying. Biden decided he wanted to spend his time as president, doing social transformation and paying off student loans and that sort of thing. I mean, that's who he is, right? He's
Yeah.
not a statesman. He's not a military general. He's not a guy who really thinks about the world and geopolitical situation other than can we get along and let's continue to trade and let's not be enemies with each other.
Right.
So his whole concept was not to build up the US military, but to go to our allies like South Korea and Japan and Australia and convince them to work with us to conduct American foreign policy. But there's a couple of problems with that right away. One is that if you've got to depend on all these other people and you can't depend on just yourself, you're already starting off wrong,
Yeah.
right? Because those other people that you're depending on have to be willing to go to war for what you think is necessary to go to war for,
Right.
right? But the Australians have already said, if there's a war in Taiwan, we'll support the United States to the extent that if there are refugees coming from the islands, we'll do that. We'll help there. We'll send some. We're not going to send warships. We're not going to go to war with China, but we'll send support craft and stuff, and we'll do that. The Japanese, who is one of the centerpieces of Biden's foreign policy efforts, the population of Japan says we don't want to go to war against China over Taiwan.
Yeah.
South Korea might actually do that on our behest because North Korea is right north of the 38th parallel, and North Korea is just China. Is just a short part to go to China. So Biden has focused all of his efforts on creating these alliances that take years and years to solidify and get to the point where people actually say, I'll commit to this, this, and this if there's a war, and we're not anywhere near that. And so China is never going to be deterred by the United States. In fact, the United States is being deterred by China. Like I mentioned, we don't put our carrier battle groups close to Taiwan because they can be knocked out of the ocean by China's missiles. So
Yeah.
they're deterring us, but we don't have any way of deterring them from invading China other than to say, don't you do it, or our allies will come to our benefit and you'll be in trouble then. But China knows because China's gone to Japan and says, if you oppose us, we'll give you scorched earth.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even be here anymore. They go to South Korea and they say, if you oppose us, we're going to cause hell for you for the rest of the millennia.
Yeah.
So we're starting on the back foot and we don't have anything to draw them in. So here's a great example of this. All this stuff going on in the Middle East right now, the Houthis in Yemen, which is owned group by Iran, is is attacking commercial ships in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean, and down near India. So Biden thought, wow, this is swell. We'll put together an armada, a task force to protect commercial shipping, but nobody wants to be in it, and nobody wants to do anything.
Right.
I mean, the Australians. I mean, remember we've got AUKUS going with the Australians, where in the 2030s and 2040s, we're going to give them nuclear submarines to help us, deter China. I mean, we're looking like 20 years out. It may never happen.
Right.
But Biden will say, oh, that's one of our key milestones right there, AUKUS. Look at that relationship. Well, just a few days ago, we were asking for help for this new task force and the Red Sea task force, and Australia sent 11 people. No boats, no ships, no war, nothing. 11 people. 11 people. So if you're Biden and you're counting on your alliances to do American foreign policy for you, it's not happening. And now it's really late in the game, and China sees this. And if we snapped our fingers right now, Brad, right now and said, right now, if I can do magic, I can snap my fingers, boom, we'll have, we'll have the decision to go up against China and to do what we need to do. It's going to take us years and years and years to build up the military assets, so forth and so on. We can only build, and I mean, I encourage all your viewers to fact check me because everything I'm telling you is absolutely true. According to the Navy, we can build 1.5 submarines a year and 1.5 destroyers a year. In China, in just one of the shipyards, they are building 6 destroyers simultaneously.
Yeah.
They are now the workshop of the world, where we were back in World War II. We could knock stuff out. We could knock an aircraft carrier out like once a month. We were really doing well. But now we're no longer that workshop, and China is. So, we're in a world of hurt, and our political leaders have not even said that they understand the problem. Rather, let
They
alone
don't.
come up with ways to solve the problem. So there we
I
are.
think, yeah, thank you for talking about that. But I feel like it's horrible that me, a regular citizen, knows, seems to know more than they show in their actions.
Oh yeah.
So it drives me nuts. How do we get a hold of you? And everybody, you should pick up Brian's book, The Hidden. It's a fantastic read. I've looked over it a bit. It's actually exciting. Between the main character who's been in the military, is now overseas in Africa trying to solve problems, and then you have this group of young, on the street people who are doing your reconnaissance. It's kind of
Yeah.
fun and exciting, and it's written from the position of somebody who's really lived it. You're like a real life Jack Reacher, actually. Am I
Well, I
right?
mean, that's what I did. I mean, I was a real spy under real cover, both non-official and official cover, for going, the better part of 20 years, and stationed all over the world. And I was a chief of base in China. So the
Wow.
book is about, what you just said, Brad, and it's about the intelligence war between the United States and China. And it talks about what we really didn't get into today yet, or we probably won't be able to do it now, is that CIA no longer can do the clandestine service mission against China because of its surveillance capabilities. You have so many CCTV cameras and so forth and so on. So on, the CIA actually says in 30 countries, those countries can follow our case officers around town without ever having a human in the loop.
Wow.
So that's why it's all, and so the CIA needs, or not even the CIA, I think you got to do away with the clandestine service in CIA, and you got to do a new kind of clandestine service, a radically new kind of clandestine
Yeah.
service. And that's what the hidden is about. So you can go to brianfairchildbooks.com, or you can go to freehiddenchapters.com, and that'll take you right to the summary, the prologue, and the first 2 chapters absolutely free. You can get an idea of what the book is about and whether you think you might like it. And you can contact me via the email on my site, and the book is available in Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Goodreads and pretty much everywhere, like that.
It's been an honor, my friend, to have you on the show today. Thank you.
Honor's all mine, Brad. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to ask you 3 questions in our lightning round so we get to know you better.
All right.
With everything, you seem like an open book, but is there something that you do that nobody knows that you do?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, I can do some kung fu. I can, I can play the blues harmonica.
What?
Yeah. It's something I got interested in, long ago. And I'm an avid hiker. I did
Yeah, me too.
two summers back. I did a 20-mile hike here on the Missouri River. So I do that a lot,
Oh,
and I
wow.
try to do a personal best and push myself. And, so that's one thing, a couple of things.
Mark Twain used to take these long walks. You should look that up along the river. Yeah, very interesting. My second question is, do you have a favorite memory in everything that you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite memory is that, and the whole thing that started me on my journey was at 14 years old, I wrote to the CIA and I said, "Dear CIA, I want to be a spy. How do I do that?" and a guy by the name of Michael Todorovich. I had just seen, Sean Connery and From Russia with Love. And when I
Yes.
saw that movie, I said, that's what I want to do. So I went down the library, tried to find out about CIA, and there was nothing for 14-year-old wannabe spies. So I wrote the CIA, and those guys, they wrote me back. And Michael Todorovich wrote me a 2-page typed letter, not just hey, thanks a lot. He said, Brian, here's the deal. Stay in junior high school, go on to high school. If you decide to go to college, here are the degrees, you should look at, and you need a foreign language. Military is always good. And when I was going through my life, Brad, I followed the Todorovich plan. And when I applied to CIA, I mean, I was up against, it's like going into SEAL Team 6. I mean, you've got
Yeah.
the best of the best, and only a few are taken. While I was going up against guys from Yale and Harvard and all this sort of thing. But I
Yeah.
had one thing that they didn't have. I had the Todorovich plan, and it carried the day. And they looked at that and said, "Man, would you like to be a clandestine service officer?" I said, "Yep." Took the oath, and that's how it all began.
That's amazing. All I can hear is Sean Connery looking at you going, so you want to be a spy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Sean. Yeah,
You want to be a blunt instrument?
that's it. Oh, you got
Yeah.
it, man. You
Thanks,
got it.
brother.
You got it down.
My parents dragged me. This is my first James Bond movie. My parents dragged me to see Diamonds Are Forever. And I'm like 10 years old. And my dad was complaining the whole time, my Hungarian father bitching about stuff. And here's what he was mad at. My dad was 6'2", he was a big guy.
Yeah.
And we could only get seats at the front of the theater because my mom made us late. He's complaining the whole way down the aisle.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I remember that to this day. I am, you know how kids remember something just
yeah. Well, did
dopey
you
like
like the
that.
movie?
I loved it. And I
Okay,
became a
all right.
James Bond fan ever since. And most
Yeah,
of my best friends, I'm still friends with them 50 years later. We remember every time we went to the James Bond movies
perfect.
because I would drag them. I go, hey, James Bond's in
Yeah,
town,
yeah, yeah. Me too.
Yeah, totally. Totally. My last question I have for you is what is your greatest hope for America?
Well, I mean, my greatest hope for America, this is like peace and love and all of that. But in reality, I mean, Americans only really have one choice. You can't have it the way it's going now. You can't be a polarized country and think that you're going to remain the leader of the world in world politics.
Yeah.
So we've got to come together at some point. We have to realize that, there are things that we're never going to agree on, but, you've got to compromise on something. You can't just have it all your way. I can't have it all my way. And if we keep doing that, China's going to take over. You're going to be speaking Chinese. They're going to sanction you. You're going to be spending all kinds of money. And, you know, there you go. You just lost America's position in the world.
Wow. Brian Fairchild, thank you so much for being on Awakened Nation, my friend. Thank you.
My honor. Thank you very much, Brad.
You got it. Hey, everybody, tune in next week. Until then, take care. Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement. This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share this episode out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success is because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.